So here's a brief rundown of how National Diversified Funding Chairman Gordon Bizar bought his first business without cash. As a fairly young, and this was 43 years ago, fairly young fellow, Gordon Bizar always loved motorcycles, and he had a friend who worked for a motorcycle company, a parts company, and this friend told Gordon the company was up for sale. And so the long and short of it was that they both joked around about wouldn't it be nice if the two of them, these two young guys with nothing going could buy the company. And after joking around a bit, they decided to give it a try. So Gordon lines up an appointment for the two of them to go and meet the owner, and the owner was very courteous with them, and they told the owner, of course, that they were there because they had an interest in buying the company. And he actually took them for a tour of the facility, showed them all the important machinery and everything. And Gordon was really intrigued by the whole process. It was his first time ever in a manufacturing facility, so you have an idea how naive he was at the time. So in any event, after talking with the owner for a while, it was time for them to go, and Gordon said to him, Mr. Owner, I'd like to think about all of this information you shared with us today. About the income of the company, the salaries, and they went through a lot of that information. And Gordon said, I'd like to get back to you in a couple of weeks with an offer. And he said, sure. They were anxious for them to see, the owner will be anxious to see what they would come back with. So anyway, to make this long story short, the owner wanted $500,000 for the company. Now, this is many, many years ago, so now it was like, this would be like 5 million today, adjusting for inflation and everything else. So needless to say, Gordon didn't have that kind of cash. So Gordon just didn't have the experience to run this company, and he really didn't have anything going for him. So it was a real challenge of what was he going to come back with in 2 weeks. But Gordon, being Gordon, he did a little research and found out that inside of this company were all these pieces of machinery, equipment, accounts receivable, these things called assets. Okay, and Gordon found out that once he owned the company, he could go into what's called an asset-based lender and could borrow up to 80% of the value of those assets. So Gordon knew that once he owned the company, he could get a substantial portion of what the purchase price was going to be right out of financing the assets. But Gordon didn't have the down payment money to begin with. The owner wanted $150,000 of the $500,000. He wanted that much as a down payment. So Gordon had no idea where he was going to get the down payment for this company from. So he did a little more research and found out that he can go to the bank and get what's called a swing loan. In other words, he could borrow $150,000 from the bank in the morning, give it to the seller, that would make the business his. Then at the afternoon, take the assets inside the business, take those assets to the asset-based lender, and then raise around $350,000 from the asset-based lender, which would easily let Gordon pay off his $150,000 loan and actually have working capital left over. Now, Gordon's big problem was he didn't have a good enough credit rating to get that loan from the bank. So he came up with the way of financing that, which is referred to as a double escrow. In other words, he had the asset-based lenders, he filled out all of the documents for them, and he had them put the $350,000 into the escrow, so that once he was the owner, that escrow would close and that money would go to the banker. Then he got the banker loan him the 150,000. See, that money went to the seller. It triggered the asset-based loan because Gordon was now the owner, which went right back to the banker to repay them. This would happen instantly, and the banker got the hold, that whole escrow money, so that it was never ever in question in the banker's mind that the banker was going to be fully repaid, because the minute this $150,000 went out, that second $350,000 came into the account to pay the bank back with money left over. So that was the technique. It's called a full leverage buyout, and that is how he bought his first business without any capital or cash of his own, and he went on to use that technique to buy out most of his competition. So eventually Gordon sold the company to a strategic buyer who was actually willing to pay him more for it than it was worth, and the lack of experience was not really a factor. So many times people who are young feel like, they don't have enough experience, they don't have credit rating, maybe they even have bad credit. Who's going to sell to them? Who's going to give them credit? Who's going to do all that stuff right? I mean, age can be a liability if you think of it that way, but it can also be an asset. I mean, why would this guy do this for Gordon? Well, first of all, he saw Gordon as the son he never had. He saw Gordon as a really bright young guy, full of ambition, full of passion, full of things that if he'd had a son, that's what he would have wanted him to have. He had no children to leave the business to, so he literally took Gordon under his wing and extended to him the flexibility he needed to buy the company. And then went on to train Gordon on how to run that business profitably. So it was a win-win all the way around. So fast forward to today, 45 years later, and through our private equity company, we help our clients do this and a whole bunch of other stuff so that they can get into business with limited amounts of capital of their own.